I'm Ashton Addison from BlockWest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show, we have Nick Douzinas, co-founder and head of business development at Ajuna Network. Nick, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Hey, Ashton, great to be here.
Likewise. I'm so excited to dive into blockchain gaming, and the gaming world since in the last couple of years here has just continued to grow exponentially with people in their houses just needing things to do, and so many have turned to games of all ages, not just young people as well. And now to take it to the next step, we're finally integrating in blockchain technology, NFTs, to allow people to actually earn value out of the game and extract it out of the game and not just play a game for half of your life and really not get anything out of it. And I know that Ajuna Network is adding in a great piece of this technology to enable that part with the blockchain, and I would love to dive into that. So let's just break right open with the conversation on what you and your team, first of all, are working on with Ajuna Network, and then we'll dive into all things in gaming.
Yep. So I think with gaming, as you mentioned earlier, we're probably in this sort of transitory phase where there's these new technologies coming up, and from individual game developers up to game studios, they're just trying to figure out, what can this technology enable. So for Ajuna, what we have created is, let's say, a decentralized infrastructure for gaming, and the idea here is that we are trying to put both the creators and the gamers back into the driving seat without having really to sacrifice on the decentralization. So we think a big component, or where I would say our expertise or sort of most of our work is on the game engine itself. We think that game engines, if you think of them a bit, let's say, like the brain of the game, that's one of the components that we're trying to figure out the best possible way for it to be able to be deployed on-chain, because we think that's sort of the true path for player governance and also the best probably path to ensure the future value of those in-game assets or NFTs. So on one side, we're trying for the gamers to abstract the technology. As a gamer, the last thing that you care about is what technology is my game, based on, or what is it running on. All I care is to be able to have easy access to something that is enjoyable and fun, and then I will sort of figure out the rest of the things. And when you look at it from the developer side, what we're trying to make sure is that blockchain on its own as a technology is not a barrier. You need to be able to keep working in your own natural environments. And when it comes to the blockchain, say, component, depending on the design of your game, for that deployment to be, easy and straightforward for the team. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're sort of working on with Ajuna.
Great intro, Nick. And you're right about the restrictions with blockchain. From what I understand, a lot of the major games that, just traditional games not using blockchain are using something like Unreal Engine or some kind of standard technology that's like the best for creating those games. And where blockchain's at right now, as we've seen with Ethereum and just trying to send basic transactions and trying to do decentralized storage, it really is not capable of holding large games at all, even Word documents and basic files of where we're at right now. So how do you sort of combine these two technologies and to meet in the middle for gamers?
Okay, that's a great question, and it's not a straight answer. I would say if you take any game, let's say there's three pillars for any game. One would be graphics, or sort of the visual integrity of the game. The second, which probably is the most important, has to do with gameplay, and third, especially in the last decade, I would say storytelling, sort of the idea of having a rich, coherent story for the community sort of to dive into. So each of these different, let's say, aspects have also their problems or, their difficulties when blockchain technology is involved. So I think from when it has to do with graphics, it's really important. That goes back to our initial sort of argument, which that I need to be able to use as a developer those game engines, those tools, those programming languages, which will lead me to those sort of visually striking environments. So that's where, for us, being able to sort of recreate and being able to take that environment and deploy it directly into our layer 2 solution without the need for smart contracts, that's where we sort of, let's say, lower the technological barrier in terms of, let's say, the visual integrity of games. Gameplay, that's more tricky because that has to do a lot with one of the inherent problems, let's say, of blockchain, which is speed. So a great story, because for us, we started as a team trying to build a game. So back in 2018, after a few experiments, what we did was we took, there was a blockchain back then, still exists, Dash, and they had a very interesting, at least back then, architecture where there was these master nodes, which we thought as a concept for player governance was pretty interesting. So we took the blockchain, we forked it, we changed a bit its consensus in order to be able to use our graphic cards, because that's what we had sort of back there to be able to make it work for our requirements. And the idea was that we wanted to be able to deploy our game on it. But it was impossible for, I would say, two main reasons. One is that we clearly underestimated the effort needing to maintain a blockchain, not so much to deploy it. Deploy it best can be done, but to maintain a sovereign blockchain when you have to deal with security and 51 attacks was impossible. And the second thing in terms of gameplay, when you have a block times of 2 minutes, really the user experience was sort of pretty bad. So that's where we partnered up with Integrity. So we are building within the substrate builders program or within the Polkadot ecosystem. And the reason why we do that is because we like the idea of having Polkadot being, let's say, a layer 0. Which basically allows you to create a blockchain based on your needs. We have chosen to create a single purpose, let's say, blockchain, which is just for gaming. That's all we do. So that's sort of how our layer 1 is built up. Our layer 2 solution, that's where we achieve, let's say, the speed and privacy. So within our layer 2 solution, which we use what are called trusted execution environments, which are based on the Intel chipset. So that's an environment within where we can maintain a speed of about 300 milliseconds while maintaining privacy. So for games, that's great. So take an example of a turn-based game, Hearthstone. That would look exactly like sort of its counterpart. So that's the way that we deal, at least with the latency issue, and we're sort of constantly experimenting on that side to be able to get it to a point where we can have real-time communications over the blockchain.
Oh, great story, Nick. And yeah, the masternode story there, it sounds fascinating, but I feel like the Polkadot technology wasn't really matured yet, and with Substrate, I feel like there's a lot to dive into there with the integrity network, and I guess choosing, from what I understand with the Substrate networks, you actually have to do a parachain lease offering to get your blockchain approved by the community. Is that what you guys have to do to get to that point? And if so, where are you at with that?
Yep. So the way that let's say the Polkadot ecosystem works, so there's Polkadot, which you can say is like the main network, and it has its sister network, which is called Kusama. On Kusama, you can see that and it's the environment that gets all of those features firsthand, where developers can get early access and experiment on it. So especially for gaming, that's a great environment for us to be able to onboard smaller studios or even single developers who want to have a more experimental approach to the game. So for that, you need to lease, as you said, your parachain. So you go through an auction. We went for our auction on Kusama last month, which was super successful, and we're very happy about it. We got the, at least to date for this year, it's the most successful parachain auction on Kusama for the year 2022. And I think it sort of just shows how, at least in the Polkadot or the Dotsama ecosystem, gaming is probably something that is needed or expected, to grow over the coming years. Now, our future goal is to be able to do the same thing on Polkadot, so be able to have our own parachain, which we're going to lease there. And you can see that more, I would say, as an enterprise solution, where sort of bigger games, more mature games, or even studios who want to launch a game can go directly towards that solution.
Oh, that's great to hear, and congratulations on being that successful in the Kusama ecosystem. And now with the actual operations of the platform and integrating games that are already built into the blockchain, having that requiring your guys' blockchain, you mentioned in the Dash story about it's one thing to set it up, but to maintain it and to grow it is a continuous job. Where are you guys at with growing it and actually integrating in projects?
Yeah. So I think from a technical point of view, maybe sort of to start with that, we found an ecosystem that works for us, because this is for us the choice of on which blockchain, let's say, or which technology was used was just based on a single a premise, which was what is best for gaming. So our it was a technology choice to use Polkadot and that ecosystem, because it sort of gives us that ability to have a sovereign blockchain without having to build up a team that has to deal with the trust and the the security part because that's covered by Polkadot. So that made us quite laser focused to making sure that at least the both our layer 2 offering and the design that we're doing around the token makes sense for the industry. One of the biggest challenges that not only us but the whole industry will face is to onboard traditional Web 2 developers into building games onto sort of Web 3. So for us currently in our pipeline, there's our own flagship game, which is where sort of everything started, which we have currently partnered up with GamePill. GamePill is a studio out of Canada who have been working years with in game development with Disney, Nickelodeon, Ubisoft, so they're really experienced in making sort of fun games. So we've partnered up with them for that. And then we have a game called New Omega, which is a third-party game which is going to be launching next year on Ajuna. And then we have a couple of, I would say, small, more experimental in-house projects as showcases, where what we're doing is just taking easy small concepts of games and just showing and how each part of our technology sort of enables the game design or the deployment of that game on our side. I think it's going to be a big challenge generally to onboard Web 2, let's say, onto Web 3 in terms of gaming as an industry at whole, but definitely worth doing it. Yeah.
Very cool. Looking forward to seeing the games. And I feel like you'd have great insight into, as you mentioned there, sort of the barriers to entry for Web 2 games and, some of these A-list games that have 100 million players plus, them taking the first steps of starting to integrate blockchain or NFTs. And it sounds like your team's technology would be ideal for that. What are you seeing as reception from these games, and are they taking very cautious approach, or are you seeing some large games that are already interested in integrating?
Yeah, definitely very cautious. I think across different sort of segments of the industry, whether those are, especially let's say the AAA studios or the bigger studios are more apprehensive than smaller ones. I think they're facing different dynamics or different problems within the industry. So I think when you take smaller indie studios, they see this as a bigger opportunity. Web3 presents a fundraising also opportunity for them, which is much more attractive than traditional fundraising for gaming, which is also very important because game development and game launching is quite capital intensive. So they need to have the funds necessary for them. And I think that really the turning point is that once we remove the technology barrier, that the technology needs to be seamless for the studio. They need to be able to integrate and plug in very easily. The real challenge is for them to, let's say, open this Pandora box of what tokenomics and tokens are, because right now we're in a messy, I would say, state of the market with gaming and tokens, because you either see games which do not need tokens at all. It's just they're there because it seems like the thing to do right now, and then you have games where their whole dynamic and experience is based around the token, sort of this play to earn mechanic. Play to earn is not new. It's always been around and it will always be around. We don't see it as a problem. We just see that when the selling point is a financial incentive, then that sort of is quite counterintuitive. So for game studios, I expect the next couple of years to be this sort of experimental phase where you can see maybe studios taking catalog games that they had somewhere sort of made in the past, and they can see, okay, can I transition this to Web3? Because it's a low cost of development for them. It's an asset that's already sitting, and it gives them, let's say, at least the opportunity to get some metrics. Okay, let me see if I get it out. What's the response? But eventually, I think once they understand that what blockchain means for gaming, it means community. And I think that's sort of the fourth pillar. If we said that there's three pillars for gaming, graphics, gameplay, story, then what blockchain add is community. And I mean real community that can be involved, that can be active, that can have a say in the direction that the game goes, that can have a real ownership of sort of what they do in the game. So I think that once they get that concept of that blockchain equals community, then the whole thing, I think, will take a different dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Great insight, Nick. And I see where your insight and where they're coming from with the Web 2 games, and they're already successful. They're already making millions of dollars. They have a huge fan base. Don't mess it up with introducing something that I think there was a game or two that tried to introduce NFTs, and there was huge backlash. And they were saying, and they were mad that they were trying to jump on a trend when people already loved the game how it was.
Yeah, it's true. But I mean, in defense, because I will defend the big studios here, I think that's exactly the signal that you want to see. A big studio, they know they're taking a risk. They know that the minute that they say something NFT, they're going to get slaughtered. It's not that they didn't expect it, but they still did it. So, kudos to them. That's the way that they can sort of push, let's say, the industry forward. And another thing that I think we are underestimating from the gaming side is that they understand the community can be equally as supportive and equally as toxic as the crypto communities can be. Very short-tempered. So they know exactly. It's not that they know where they're getting into, to put it in a way. You'll see, even if you go in the communities of the most successful games today, and you just go through what's going on in the comments, it's horrible. It's sort of like gamers complaining about everything about the game. It's messed up. The developers are destroying their lives. We have more as a crypto community. We have more in common with the gaming community than maybe we would like to admit. But yeah. It's going to be a tough transition. For sure.
For sure, yeah. There's always going to be critical feedback. Now, with games that start integrating using Ajuna's technology, you talked about in Kusama and Polkadot blockchain. Do they just back on, like, if they are integrating NFTs, for example, are they specifically limited to the NFTs that your technology is implementing, so all of the NFTs will then be on Kusama, or how does that work with and if they create a coin as well in NFTs?
Yep. So that's a great question. We try to make a design that as I said has as much transparency for users onboarding, so it has to be nice and easy and abstracted. And on the other hand, you have to have access to all the markets. So whether that standard is an ETH standard or it's a remark standard on our ecosystem, you should be able to access all of those markets for your in-game assets. So our goal is that, yes, obviously, first thing that we're building out is all of those connections within our ecosystem, making sure that we're compatible with Remark, making sure that the other players in the NFT industry that can add value to our community, whether those are the unique networks, the moonbeams, that we're working with them in order to make sure that, but we don't stop there. We think that for gamers, these sort of barriers or silos that we have within our industry, which are called the Polkadots, the polygons, don't exist in their eyes. So we shouldn't sort of introduce them to them. So even for us, talking with other blockchain is part of our sort of day one work. We're already talking with Polygon Studios in order to figure out what's the best way that we can ensure that both your community can access our games, but also our community can access your markets if needed. So we're absolutely building towards an open interface for at least in-game assets, yes.
Mm-hmm. That's great to hear, Nick. And that sort of goes back to what you said at the beginning about people don't really care what the technology is of what game engine built the game, as long as they're playing it and it works well. And that would go the same for the NFT. Who cares what blockchain it's on? As long as I own the sword that I got in the game and it's an NFT that I own, who knows really what technology it's working on. So good to know. And now with the Kusama launch, that includes a governance token or some kind of native token for Ajuna as well. Maybe you could touch on that and if that's required or how it's integrated into the network for the people that have developed the games and for people that are playing.
Yep, I think that was one of our biggest, I would say, design decisions that had to do with the token, because one of the things that we found quite problematic in the current ecosystem is that games are forced into this dual token system. So there's a gas token, which depending on which blockchain you're launched, whether that's on Solana or on Ethereum or Polygon, you have that as your gas fee token, and then you have your own game token. Now, the problem that we saw with that design is that at the end of the day, the success of a game comes from the creators and the community themselves. So if a game gains traction and is successful, then what's happening in these other ecosystems is that that gas fee is filling up the treasury of something else instead of your treasury, and it's rewarding a community a general community, the Ether community or the Polygon community, instead of the community that's creating directly the value. So on Ajuna, we have created a one token system. So if a game wants to have by design its own game token, it can use that game token to pay also gas fee. So as a result, you have a successful project and you're getting traction. That gas fee is filling up your treasury, is rewarding your creators, is empowering your community. And on the other hand, if you are a game, excuse me, that doesn't have a token by design because your game doesn't require it, you can always use the native token of the Ajun to power, let's say, your game. And then, as let's say the final puzzle, the token holder of the Ajun token holder, somebody who wants to just sort of hold the token and support the network, he can get rewarded both. He gets rewarded both in the native token of the Ajun, but also he gets a proportionate, let's say, reward from all of the different game tokens that are within the ecosystem. So I think it's a design that's meant to reward active communities and active creators. Yeah.
Very cool. And speaking of active communities, for people that want to learn more about the Ajun token and the games your team's building and just more on the technology for any game developers and studios watching, what is the best way to find out where your community is, get involved, and learn more about your team's technology?
Yep. So you can definitely go to our website, which is at ajuna.io, and then we have sort of different segments depending on what you're looking to learn for game developers, for gamers themselves, and also a bit more understanding about our technology and our token. If you're a developer, you can find our Ajuna GitHub simply by searching it, and obviously our Telegram channels can be quite active. So yeah, that's where you can get most of the information from us. We're going to be at the end of the month at Polkadot Decoded in Berlin. We're going to give a presentation which is gaming on Ajuna. So we're basically going to tell our story of how, from game developers ourselves, trying to build our own game, and learning the hard way through Dash and all of these different adventures we had. How we ended up building a game and sort of ending up creating an infrastructure for the gaming industry.
Amazing. And I will leave those links in the description box to make it easy for the viewers. Thank you, Nick, for your insights into the gaming industry, and all the best on everything Ajuna is working on. And let's follow up in the near future.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. Have a good one.